How long does it take to learn a language for beginners, experts, and everyone else? So this is an interesting question that a lot of people have, and basically it does depend on a lot of different things. There's not like, as you can see with the picture here on the side, it's got like the different categories of how hard it is. It's very, very oversimplified for like that. Like there's just no way you're learning Spanish or French in 24 weeks if you're a first-time language learner. It's not going to happen that quickly. So I'm just going to run you through a lot of the different things that can impact how long it will take to learn a language and how you can actually put as much of the attributes in the positive category to speed it up as much as possible. So we've got experience at language learning as number one most important thing. So your skill and experience as a learner will greatly impact how long it takes to learn a language. Obviously, if you're doing it for the first time, it's going to be the hardest versus you've already learned 5. It's going to be so much quicker because you don't really need to relearn the concepts. You just need to learn how they actually work with that language. So what's an example? Take the concept of like changing verbs and that kind of thing. That's probably something I'll explain in another video, but you don't need to relearn how that works because you already understand how that works. You just need to know how that language does it with their own words. So, and there's obviously 100 different things, but once you've done it all once, or most of them once, because not every language has everything, it becomes so much easier the next time. So going back to that picture, if you take the ones that are red are like meant to be the easiest ones. So you've got Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, a few other ones like, looks like Swedish up there, and Romanian off to the side, maybe. They are the easiest ones. It's not going to take you 24 weeks for the first time. It might take you over a year. But if you learn Italian, for example, like I did, you could definitely learn Spanish in maybe even half the time if you're good at it, or potentially more or less, depending on how good you are naturally, which is a small factor of it, and also how hard you try. So, yeah, an example is I've started learning Russian after I finished Italian, and even though Russian, as you can see on the right, is a level 4, compared to a level 1, which is obviously oversimplistic with this picture, as I've said, but Russian is still a lot harder and very different. I've begun learning that and progressed much faster, even though Russian is significantly harder and it's very different from Italian, even though they don't really have that much in common, just because I've already done it before. So it is a lot quicker the further times you do it, and it compounds exponentially. So it's not just getting the same amount quicker, it gets like the amount you get better at it increases every time. And there's not really a way to shortcut that. Just getting better will allow you to learn faster. Okay? Familiarity with the language. So how similar the language is to one that you already know. Obviously, if it's your first language, presumably you speak English, you're looking for languages that are similar to English. So basically looking back at how languages have evolved, which ones have the most things similar to English, so the most similar words, similar concepts, similar pronunciation, similar writing. So obviously a language like French or whatever that's written in the same letters as English, and it's not too different. They have a lot of borrowed words stolen from each other, mostly by English, and things like that. It's going to be easier than something like Chinese, where you look at it, and even though you can't, like with French, you can still read it with bad pronunciation because it uses the same letters, but with something like Chinese, Arabic, Russian to an extent, you can't even read it because it's using a different alphabet, and then you can't pronounce it. The sounds are all unique, that kind of thing, or most of them are unique. So you want languages that are more similar to English if you're looking for an easier language. Obviously, it is fun to go and learn a harder one, but that's probably something better to do down the line rather than tackle it straight away and then get sick of it, really. So an example is Italian. It's quite similar to English. It's probably not the most similar, but it's definitely like top 5, if not like top 10, if not top 5. And it took about 18 months. Some people will be able to do it quicker. Some people might have to take longer. I did have to juggle it with other things. So it took about 18 months to reach, I wouldn't say fluency, but I can speak it basically to anyone, talk about anything really. And it took, I think I did French for like a week of low intensity learning and picked up an Ollie Richards book, and I was able to actually read it. Not get every word, obviously, but I could have answered all the questions, summarized what it's about, that kind of thing, just because it's similar enough to Italian that even when I saw words I didn't know, they were actually similar to Italian, and I could just understand what they were, because it's like, okay, it's spelt slightly different, and it makes sense if it was this, so it has to be this word. So familiarity with the language is definitely a big thing. Once you've learnt a few and you've got languages from different parts of the world and that kind of thing, you can basically build off all of them. Like, if I was to learn Ukrainian after Russian, it would actually be so much easier than Russian because they have that much in common. And if I was to learn French and Spanish, which I intend to, and I'm just doing a little bit on the back burner at the moment, it would just be, it's already proven to be so much easier because I already know that stuff about Italian. And then third, you've got the environment and strategies. This one's an interesting one because ideally, like in the most ideal hypothetical situation, you'd learn so quick if you were just thrown into the country of the language you were learning. But that's unrealistic. You can't really do that. Like, obviously for work and that kind of thing, that might be an opportunity, but no one's just going to go move to Denmark to learn Danish. Like, it's just hard. You might visit there, but you're not going to live there. So the next best thing to do is just to immerse yourself as much as possible. So that means content, all that other things. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. But basically, the more you immerse yourself in a language, the easier it is to learn, because that's kind of how you learn English or your first language in the first place, because you're building off nothing. Remember that. With that idea of familiarity with the language, when you first start learning, you have nothing. You're actually worse than you are now. So you have to learn from point zero. Now that you know English, you at least have something slightly more common with every language because you at least know one. So with immersion, basically any content, books, videos, movies, anything is going to help you learn just by hearing it. Even if you don't understand anything about the words, it will pay off in the long run. So as far as advice, implementing these three things, these factors that speed up a language or make a language easier, is the best thing you can do to increase your learning volume. So experience, unfortunately, this one there isn't a lot of shortcutting. Just know that the more you do it, the better you will get. That can kind of motivate you and things like that. That one is a bit annoying out of these three, but the other two, luckily, are fairly easy to implement. So familiarity, starting with languages easier, is the best way to do this. On the next slide, I've got a few languages. I'll get to that in a second. But the more similar they are to English or whatever you know, and branching out from there is the best thing you can do to make it easier, quicker, less painful. There's always going to be learning and that kind of stuff. You're always going to snap a pencil in half or whatever, but that's just the best thing you can do. And then environment and strategies. Obviously, we've already talked about this. Total immersion isn't really realistic. If you can do it, great. It's going to be so good. And just being surrounded by people that can help you, especially if they're bilingual and can talk your normal language as well to give you a hand with that kind of thing. If you can't, the next best thing is near total immersion. So absorbing content, books. Try and have one book on the go. You don't have to read it every day of something in the language you're learning. And then you can watch shows on Netflix. You can find vlogs for free. You can even find ebooks for free. Be careful with that one, but you can. That kind of thing. Easiest languages to learn. So the most similar to English. Most similar to English. So you've got basically either Romance languages or Germanic languages are going to be the most similar. It's interesting because English is actually a Germanic language, but I would recommend starting with a Romance language because they're generally easier. So whilst Dutch is the easiest language in my opinion, just I haven't learnt it, but from looking at them all, a Romance language is probably easier because Germanic languages have some difficult things to understand. I'm not going to go into it, but they have some parts of them that are going to be quite challenging to understand, because English is actually quite challenging to understand. You're just lucky you learnt it straight away. And if you try and do that again, it might be a bit hard and put you off. By all means, go for it. But I would recommend starting with probably Spanish or Italian. They are probably the easiest Romance languages to understand. There's parts to them, obviously. There's parts to every language that are going to be different and you don't understand, but you can learn them. I'll have videos up on that and you can find tons of content out there. The important thing is just to not give up and keep going, because you will learn it eventually. So definitely start with that, Italian or Spanish if you can. Any language on the screen is fine. And honestly, if you want to start with Mandarin or Russian or Arabic, go for it. It's going to be hard, but you can do it. People have done it. And yeah, prove me wrong. Well, you're not proving me wrong, but yeah, go for it. Anyway, that should be all. It's not too difficult. Go for it.